Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Today's webinar is going to focus on AT tools for writing, and we're going to look at apps that live on our iOS and Android devices. So I'm happy you're here. I hope you've been enjoying the series of webinars. If this is the first webinar that you've listened to, the first recording that you've listened to, well, welcome. I'll give you a little sense of what's going to happen and who I am. So there's me, that's who I am. My name is Mike Murata. I am an AT specialist. I will be your guide through these 10 webinars, through this series of AT webinars. I'm an AT specialist. I live in New Jersey, provide services across the state through my own consulting company, and then also go out around the country to provide training as well for people in all areas, in all environments with technology. I work with K-12, higher ed, employment, people in the community, whatever it might be. So that's me. If you want to reach out and get me, there's my contact info. You have my website, my email address, and my Twitter handle. Those are good ways to get me. And feel free. You can reach out for anything at all. I'm game to talk about just about anything. It can be about this webinar. It could be about something else that you're dealing with related to technology supporting students with disabilities. So whatever you're feeling, please feel free. I'd be happy to chat with you about it. So like I mentioned, this is a series of 10 webinars. This is the 5th one in the series. So if you're watching them in order, this is number 5. The beauty of these, because they're recorded and they're all posted up online, you don't have to watch them in order. So then that number 5 means nothing. Doesn't even matter at this point. This helps me organize them. When we go and look at the Google site that all of the work lives on, this will be listed as webinar number 5. So that part does matter as you start to look at the headings of where these webinars are. So again, I mentioned there's 10 webinars. They have all been recorded and posted up on a Google site. And so you have that Google site address right there on the slide. And quite honestly, if you're listening to this right now, you've already been to the Google site because that's the way you're going to get to the recording. But just out of curiosity, if we want to see it to give you a sense of what's happening there, the website address is sites.google.com/view/NHATI webinars. Doing that will get you here. So here is the home page for all of the webinars. As you go through, up on the right-hand top corner are some drop-down menus. And you see the drop-down menu for webinar series, and that's where all of the different webinars live. So they each have their own page. When we go to the page of each webinar, what you will get is the little session description to tell us what it is that we're going to be looking at in that webinar. You will get the webinar recording. I clicked on this one just to give us a sense of what this looks like. So this is the Writing with Chrome webinar. So that gives us a sense of who we are. So then actually, I think this is not webinar 5. This is webinar 4 in the series. So my mistake, I'll fix that as I put it up. So with this, you'll have the recording from the webinar. So here's the one that I did for the Chrome webinar for writing. So you'll be able to watch that. Underneath each of the webinars is a Google document that is wide open and allows you to edit. So feel free, get in the document. I left just a bunch of spaces, really just a jumping off point. I'm looking for a way for us to connect and share information since we're going to be watching these at different times. We're going to post these up and people can watch them in whatever order they want. And so if you have questions or comments or ideas, or you're struggling to think of how you might apply this information, whatever it might be, this Google Doc is going to be your friend. On it, I have a spot where we can each add our names in, so we can put our names in so we can reach out and talk to each other. I think that's a nice way to kind of build our networks and foster collaboration as we go through this. On each document, I gave you some resources to start with. Like anywhere else, just a starting point, something to get us going. You're welcome to throw in your own resources there. I would love that. That would be awesome. because I'd love to get some new resources from everybody else. So if you have a link to something that you want to share, please share it there. And then finally, at the bottom of each Google Doc is a spot for group notes. And that's exactly what it sounds like. This is a spot where we can all add in our own ideas. This is where you could ask questions. This is where you could post answers. This is our opportunity to communicate back and forth. So we'll do that throughout this period with the webinars viewable. Now these will be up. I'm not taking them down, so they will be up. But over the next couple months, you'll be able to pop on there, see what other people have written, talk back and forth with people. I would say to you, if you're on there and you don't see other comments right away, don't get discouraged. Don't feel like your voice is not being heard. Remember, people are looking at these in different order. So they might not look at it at the same time you do. So post your question, check back every once in a while, see if someone's responded. I'll make sure that I go through all of the Google Docs on a fairly regular basis to make sure that if someone had posted something, at least I acknowledge that so you know that someone's listening. And even if I don't have the answer, at least I'll pop on so that you know that someone's out there listening. So this will kind of foster this collaboration during this period where we're going to be looking at these in kind of an asynchronous way. We'll look at them whenever the spirit moves us and we have some time to watch them. With that said, we're also trying to find a way to collect us together in real time. And so how we're going to do that is we're going to host these real-time webinars that we're calling AT Tool Time Chats. They will happen through Zoom. Zoom is the video conferencing platform. It's actually what I'm using right now to record the webinar. But what will happen is we will put up a link to a webinar room, and then at that predetermined date and time, we will get together and we can talk in real time to each other about this. So the webinar time for this topic, which is AT Tools for Writing, looking at tablet-based apps, the date and time for that is Thursday, October 12th at 3 p.m. So at that time, we'll get together in real time. I'll have some kind of jumping off points that we can start with, but that's really a time for all of you to connect with me and each other to talk about things deeper. So if you have questions, if you have other tools you'd like to see, my suggestion is post that stuff up in the Google Doc so I know that that's something you're interested in. And then as I start to prepare for those days, I will make sure if people have asked questions or requested different things, I'll make sure I have that ready that we can look at when that day comes. But otherwise, I'm going to leave that pretty wide open. I'm not going to prep a whole lot of stuff because I want you to all lead the discussion. I want you to come with ideas. I want to turn the floor over to you. I'll turn the microphone over and I'll quietly sit here and listen, which will be fantastic. I'll love that. But I'll let you talk. Maybe you want to show something. Maybe you're working with a student and you want to share some information and share an example of what you've done. That would be awesome. Let's do that. So the tool time chat for this topic, again, is Thursday, October 12th at 3 p.m. All of the tool time chats happen on Thursday afternoons at 3 p.m. Their dates are spread out across the fall and actually into the new year as well. So we kind of tried to spread them out so that we had some time in between to really kind of, they weren't all forced on people right away. Give you time to explore the webinars and really look at them. The links and the times for each of these tool time chats are also listed on the Google site on their own page. So you'll be able to get to that stuff pretty quickly. So again, that's the time for this one. I hope you join me for that. That'll be fun. All right, enough of that preamble stuff. Let's jump into our topic for what we're going to talk about today as we start looking at this idea of AT tools for writing. And we're going to, again, focus on tablet-based supports. Looking at both Android and Apple tablets and kind of this idea of the different areas of apps that are out there. Now, with that said, I've said it in the other webinars, so if you're watching this one out of order and you've watched a bunch, you've heard me say this different ways, but the same idea. As we go through this, I don't want this to feel like a shopping trip for you. I don't want you to gather all of these apps, whether you need them or not. What I want you to do is kind of observe how these apps might work, but then always refer back to the set framework where we remind ourselves of what it is we're actually trying to accomplish with technology. Remembering that we look at the student and their needs and abilities and their expectations for technology, for support. We look at environments. Where are the students completing their work? The tasks, what do the students need to complete? And then finally, we look at the tools. And so I want you to remind that as I go through, because quite honestly, all of these apps are not going to be appropriate for every student, and that's okay. But what I wanted to give you is kind of a cross-section of different apps and supports that are out there and let you think about ways you might apply them as you move forward. Now, what I'll do as we go through is I'm going to try to hit some apps that focus on each area here mentioned in the stages of the writing process. So we'll look at tools for pre-writing, we'll look at drafting tools, revising, editing, and publishing. And so as we go through, I want you to think about these tools and think about what it is that these tools are meeting in relation to the writing process. And so I'll show you, like I said, just kind of a nice sample set of different ones. Am I going to show you every app? No, definitely not. But I'll show you some, and more importantly, I'll show you ones that I have used and I can share with you how I've used them with students, and maybe that will help trigger an idea for you of how you might be able to use them. The other thing too is we're not going to really focus on apps that help with writing itself, the mechanics of writing. I know there's a lot of apps out there that will assist students with writing letters and numbers. We're not going to focus on many of those. I do have a resource that's on the Google Doc that you could go to and you can explore some of those. Those, I would say, just go and explore them. There's so many of those. And you know, a lot of them are geared towards very young children. So I would warn you with those, if you're looking at those apps to help a student develop a skill of writing letters and numbers, I would remind you, think about something that looks age appropriate. Many of those are primary colors with dancing monkeys and lions and things like that. And that might not be the most appropriate if you're looking at an older student who is developing this skill. So what I would say is check those out. Many of them are free. So like anything else, free apps, we can go on, download them, explore them. If we decide they do not meet our needs, delete them. Don't keep them cluttering up your devices. I know a lot of us struggle with this device management piece of managing the space on our devices. And a lot of times it's because we're keeping apps that we're just really not using that much. So if you're not going to use it, get rid of it. Clear up the space on your iPad. Clear it up on your tablet so that you can use the tools you need to use. And so there's my little soapbox moment of keeping your device clean. All right, so we think about this idea, and even before we start looking at apps we can add and tools that we might explore that are beyond what's in our device already, I like to remind us about the built-in accessibility features. Are there built-in features that could help your student with writing? And so we think about this on our tablets and smartphones. Either platform, doesn't matter, iOS or Android, you have this idea of built-in voice access. That is a writing support. That could cover many of the areas we talked about. It's a pre-writing tool, it's a drafting tool, it's a revising tool, it's editing. It's all of those pieces we can look at using voice access to support that. And whether you're on either of the platforms, that option is built in automatically. Open up an app that allows you to write into it. If you're on an iOS device, open the Notes app. I mean, it's as simple as that. You don't even have to buy a word processor. You don't even have to install a word processor. Open up the Notes app and use the built-in microphone to dictate text in. And that could be a tool for support to begin this writing process. Now, if you saw the other writing webinar already, I shared this chart, this slide that was developed by Kelly Fonner, this idea of thinking about how you write with your voice. And because a lot of times people will say, well, writing with the voice is easy, and so we should get all our students doing it because, you know, the people will point to a student in a class and say, well, this student talks, so they should be able to do this. Writing with your voice is one of the hardest things for us to do. It's one of the hardest tasks for students to do sometimes. We have to remember that this is not easy, and there is more that goes into this than simply opening our mouths and starting to talk. And so we think about this little cycle of what is involved here. The student starts at the top left and has to think about what they want to write. Once they think about it, they have to compose that in their head. So they have to bring with them some understanding of the rules of writing. So there is some prerequisite skill that they might need in order to do this successfully. Now, take a step back from that. With that said, students can use this if they are just beginning to learn the writing process. So if they want to dictate ideas out and thoughts and fragments, they could certainly do that. At some point, they're going to need support in order to pull that in together into something that is a full, complete sentence, paragraph, assignment, whatever it might be. So there is a composition piece here. If students can do it in their head, that would make this easier as a tool, because then they can simply talk and the sentence has been put together in a complete way that when it's spoken makes sense. And so what we have is this idea: I think, I compose it in my head, I speak. All right, so those are my first three steps. Now I have these the other half of this process, which is I have to read what showed up on the screen. And I have to check it to make sure it's accurate. Any of us who have used speech recognition before know that as good as it is, there are still moments where it gets it wrong. And so we still need to read it, review it, check it, and if it gets something wrong, we need to edit this work. Now, the editing could happen right then, or it could happen at some later time. So we can look at that depending on the student's skills and abilities when they do that editing, but there is some point that the student will have to do editing. For some students, it makes more sense to do the editing at a later time, so they need to get all their ideas out and then go back and edit, and that's fine too. Other students, and I work with several students that are like this, they dictate a sentence, that sentence must be completely accurate before they can move on to the next thought. And they'll be completely preoccupied with that sentence until they fix it. And so for those students, we fix it as we go. Dictate a sentence, fix it. Dictate a sentence, fix it. That's okay too. Whatever works for them. But recognize that this whole process is working every time. And on top of it, this process is very intense. This is cognitively very demanding to do this. And so we have to be aware of that as students use this, about this process and how this could impact them, and are they capable of completing all these steps? And if they are, well, great. And this is a good process. I think a lot of the tools have gotten very good with voices. Many of our tools that we use for voice recognition now are web-based, and they do a nice job of filtering voices. So if we have accents, if we have students with affected speech in some way, we can get some pretty good recognition for that, and students will find this to be a powerful solution. The trick is, like anybody else, is the sticking with it and finding the right environments to do this in so your writing can be successful. Some of the other things that we're starting to see more and more of with our tablets and our smartphones is the ability to write with a stylus. whether it's a stylus that comes with your Android tablets, whether it is even like a Microsoft Surface tablet has its own pen that you can use. Or if you're using the Apple devices, you're using the iPad, you can use the Apple Pencil. These tools are giving us functionality of digitally writing, and in some cases transcribing that and changing that handwriting into text. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about this idea of sketchnoting, and you see a picture of it along the bottom right there, where the individual is writing on the screen, but also adding in pictures to provide support. Maybe that's a solution for our students. This idea of providing another level of support to go along with their print or text that they've put on the screen. And so we consider that, we keep that in mind as we go forward as well. One of the areas that provides a lot of writing support in the iOS environments, this is in your Apple devices, is the ability to add in third-party keyboards. So these are tools that you can download just like an app, but what it does, instead of storing an app on your device, it installs another keyboard that you can turn on and use. So when the on-screen keyboard pops open, you have other choices. And you can get to this because I've given us the kind of path through this, because I've worked with people and they've said, well, I've installed that, I have no idea where it is and I can't get to it. But if you go into your settings option and you select General and then choose Keyboard, it will open up the Keyboards menu, which gives you some options that you can turn on and off automatically. Things like auto capitalization, spelling check, the predictive text that pops up. So if we have that on our keyboards where you start typing, and what happens, I get word prediction on the top. You can turn that on and off. I would say turn it on. Why not? Give yourself that additional support. But at the very top of that menu is a choice called Keyboards. And when you choose that keyboard, it automatically tells you what keyboards you already have installed. So on the picture on the left on mine, I had started with just two keyboards active, an English keyboard and an emoji keyboard. But underneath that, you have an option to add new keyboard. And if you downloaded any of these third-party keyboard apps, this is where they would show up. So I could click Add New Keyboard, and suddenly I have a list of all the others that I had installed on my device. Now, they weren't active at the time, and so a lot of these keyboards, I don't keep them all active all the time because I don't want the conflict, and sometimes they all do the same thing, and I don't want them all running at the same time. But I do turn them on when I need them. And if you were using this for a student, you would have found, hopefully, the one that works for them. Or if you were trialing one, you would have only one on at a time, and they would trial that one and see how it works. So you would just be turning one on. But then this is where you turn those keyboards on. And what we end up with, when your keyboard pops up on the bottom left, in between your microphone key and the numbers key, there is your keyboards key, which will have a little picture of a globe on it. When you click that, it will cycle you through the keyboards you have installed. And so you'll be able to turn on one of these other keyboards in order to provide another level of support for your student. And so out of that list that I had over there, here's a handful of the ones I've used, and maybe you want to try these and see how they work. Maybe this is something that your students might be able to use. On the top left is something called the Got It Dyslexia keyboard, and this is a keyboard that will pop up and provide additional levels of support for spelling and grammar correction. So it's a really powerful tool that provides more support in those two areas for people as they're using the keyboard. That might be something you want to explore. The top right is something called Phraseboard. And what you do there is you can actually program in phrases that will pop up on a keyboard, and you can simply click and have those things drop text directly in there. So not just keys anymore, but text, words, phrases. That's a really interesting one. I've used that one in the past. I had a student who was performing lab experiments in science with a group, and there was a form they needed to fill out online. And what we found out was the words that they were putting in the form were always the same. So it was words about their experiments. They found the expected results, surprising results, something else, and there was a bunch of other words that they used, but they always used the same groups of words. So for the student I was working with, we programmed them into Phraseboard, and now that student didn't have to type those words every time, but simply activated that keyboard and hit the keys, and it would drop those words in and those phrases in automatically. Increase their speed, increase their ability to be independent in that activity. So now they did not need to have an aide alongside them anymore to help activate the keys on the keyboard. They could do that as they move through the experiment. So this is a really nice, very specific application of that, but a really powerful application of that for this student. The bottom right corner shows the phonics keyboard, which is a keyboard with letters on it, but also has pictures on each key. And those pictures have objects on them that start with the same letter. So if you're looking to pair picture and letters to help identify them, that might be a keyboard that you might use to provide that level of support to a student. And then the bottom left is the co-writer keyboard. So that is the co-writer program, which is our word prediction tool. It's a standard QWERTY keyboard layout, but it has the word prediction along the top. It has the ability, as all of the co-writer tools have, has the ability to put topic dictionaries in there, so I can now provide another level of support to my student as they're writing. And again, those might be solutions. Think about, as we're using those keyboards, if we're using a third-party keyboard to provide writing support, that keyboard's active in any app your student goes to. So then the student can move forward in the same apps and spaces that everybody else is using, but they're using a specialized keyboard to help them provide another level of support. So that might be something to explore, might be an option for you. So definitely check those out. But remember where they go once you install them. You will not see an icon on your screen. It will show up in your keyboards list. The other thing, there's a lot of apps out there to provide support for note-taking, writing, organization, whatever you want to call it. And really powerful ones, especially when we start thinking about supports that we could use for the students that we're working with that might need alternate formats for materials. They might need to have alternate input options. We can look at different ones. The app on the left is called Notability. One of Notability, again, big features of Notability, the ability to take pictures and drop them in a note. I can handwrite, I can type, I can draw a picture, I can dictate information in there. Very powerful app that then I can export that information out if I want to, and then connect that to my other services, however else I'm keeping myself organized. So a nice tool, keeps my notes available to me, but allows me to enter notes in a very broad range of ways. The app on the right is called the Audio Note app. That's one of my personal favorites. I use it a lot. That is similar to when we think about the LiveScribe pen, where I'm able to I'm able to record the sound in an environment as I type notes. And then after I'm done with the class, the lecture, the meeting, whatever it was that I was recording, I can hit the play button. And if I tap on any of my words that I had typed, it will play me that moment in time where that note was recorded. So if the example on the picture there shows someone who is listening to an introduction to their class about a lecture. And so their notes have things written on it like syllabus, research paper, begin lecture, electrons. Those are the cues that the person has written on their notes. But what's happening is the app had been recording the whole time. So if I want to go back and listen to what the syllabus is going to be for my class, I can simply tap on the syllabus and it plays that moment in my class where my professor was telling us about the syllabus. Really nice way to ensure that your students get everything they need, even if they're not good typists or they have some processing issues. I use this app with an individual with pretty significant processing issues. And his problem always stemmed from he would be engaged in the lecture, he'd hear something important, he would recognize it was important, look down to write that note. And by the time he finished the note and looked back up, the class was on to something else because of the processing and the writing time that took. And so he had very good notes, but then he would have large pieces of time that he would miss. And then he would have another really good note, but then a large chunk of time after that he would miss. So we employed one of these apps for him and told him, don't write anything. When you hear something that's important, type a letter on the screen. Type a letter and hit enter. And then keep listening. And when you hear the next thing that's important, type a letter and enter. And so what he would have at the end of classes was a long list of a letter, but really what that was bookmarks for him to go back to. And what he would do then is he would listen to it, he would tap on each of those letters, listen to what was happening in that moment, and then write a better note alongside of it. But what happened is there was no time constraint anymore. There's no time pressure anymore. He could write whatever he wanted and then simply go to the next one and write the next note to himself. So it made for a very powerful solution for him and made him a much better note taker, much more independent. So I'll give you a quick setup of what the Audio Note app looks like and how it works. So what you're going to see is, just to kind of paint the picture of this video a little bit, is I have a TED Talk happening on my computer screen, and I have the Audio Note app open on my iPad, and I'm going to take notes as I listen to the video.
What does it mean to spend our time well? I spend a lot of my time thinking about how to spend my time. Probably too much. I probably obsess over it. My friends think I do. But I feel like I kind of have to. Because these days it feels like little bits of my time kind of slip away from me. And when that happens, it feels like parts of my life are slipping away. Specifically, it feels like little bits of my time get slipped away to various things like this, like technology. I check things. I'll give you an example. If this email shows up, how many of you have gotten an email like this, right? I've been tagged in a photo. When this appears, I can't help but click on it right now, right? It's like, what is a bad photo? So I have to click it right now. But I'm not just going to click see photo. What I'm actually going to do is...
Okay, I'm going to stop the video just to give us a sense. So what you heard was a lot of speech coming from that gentleman. And what I ended up writing on the app was simply single words. And now what I can do is, and that's what would happen next. Let's play forward a little bit. I just wanted to make sure. The video is a little hard to see, but I think it's a great example of using this feature of the tool.
In the next 20 minutes. What does it mean to are slipping away? Specifically, it feels like, how many of you have gotten an email like this, right?
So you couldn't really tell what was happening on the video, but as I tapped on the different words, so I had written time slips, and I tapped on that with my finger, and it jumped to that moment in the recording where he started talking about time slipping. Then later in the video, he had explained about receiving an email, and I had written example email. I was able to click on that and go to that moment in the recording so I could listen to it. So you get this sense of this ability that we would have to have our students supported and not have to write a whole lot, but they could always go back to it. So it's a powerful tool for that. And I'll go one step further. This is an example of a student I'm working with right now who we're going to try the Audio Note app, but this is a student who also does not really type and wants to do his notes through sketchnoting. So sketchnoting is this idea of taking information as you're listening to it and drawing pictures to correspond to the information. So if you're more of a visual learner and you start drawing pictures to make those connections. So we're going to try this, but in the process, we want to make sure he still has access to the information. And so what we've been practicing with, and that picture on the screen is my example of what I was practicing with, is we've been practicing with the Audio Note app and the Apple Pencil, and he's able to draw on the screen and then go back later and he can tap on his pictures and it would play that moment where he recorded it. So it will work. It's just going to be interesting. I think it's a different experience, but at least technically it will work. And so now our trick will be, how effective is it? Hopefully by the time we get together for our AT tool chat, maybe he will have been using this already. I'm hoping that we can start this soon. His technology hasn't arrived yet, so I'm hoping that it comes soon. And then we can explore this and I can kind of give you a status report of how this is working. But know that technically it can work. Now we just have to get the student using it to see if it does work for him. I had mentioned Google Keep and a couple other webinars, and I want to mention it again because that's how much I love it. This idea of using a tool that allows me to organize and write notes, and it is app-based. I can use it on any device, and it also allows me to take notes in any format. I can take pictures, I can handwrite notes, I can record notes to myself. These notes can then be color-coded and organized. And more importantly, if I'm using Google Docs, I can share these notes directly into the doc in order to support me. So a powerful tool. If you're not using it yet, my thought is I'm just going to keep bringing it up in every webinar until you start to use it. And no, that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it cuts across a lot of the areas that we're talking about. When we start thinking about, instead of giving our students 10 different tools to do things, what if we can find one tool that could potentially do a bunch of things that they could get very good at, use it effectively to support them in multiple areas? And so that's when I start looking at a tool that has a lot of features in it that I can see how it would support a student. So that's my push behind Google Keep. Very powerful tool. If we're thinking about visual outlining, there are web-based outlining tools that I had mentioned in the Chrome writing webinar. If we think about app-based tools, a very good one is Inspiration. Inspiration has apps that will work on your mobile device that perform this graphic organizer function on your mobile device. And it allows you to create visual maps to connect ideas together and then transform those maps into text for a student. So they have both Inspiration and Kidspiration as options. The Inspiration is the higher level. The Kidspiration is the younger student version. But something to think about. How can we use this in order to provide a level of support that our students might need? We think about writing. We're writing on a mobile device. Think about Google Docs, especially if your students are in a Google school. Google Docs is an app that will work anywhere. It'll work on both of your platforms, and more importantly, sync back to a computer if your student needs it. So if we're looking for any way that we can do word processing, this might be our solution. And think about pairing this with some of the other supports. Think about pairing it with your voice dictation that is built into your device automatically. Now I'm dictating text directly into it. And then I'm able to sync that across devices. There are other word processor options Remember, you can use Notes that comes right with the iOS devices. That's a word processor. Google Docs, it's free. It will give you a word processor. Look at some of those tools. If you are in an Office 365 district, which is using Microsoft Office, there are apps for those tools as well. You can get a Word app that will allow you to use your mobile device and then sync your information up with your account. So we're seeing a lot more of this where our writing spaces are networked together and will allow us to access them from just about anywhere. So keep that in mind, is that Google Docs is out there. It's not just a Chromebook thing. It's not just a computer thing, but it's an every device thing. We can get to it from anywhere. We can use it from anywhere. We think about providing text-to-speech support. We have an app like Voice Dream Writer, which allows me to do word processing, and I can get text-to-speech support in there. Text-to-speech support, I can get some word prediction built into the writing piece. So I have the ability to support another need a student might have. So looking at ways, again, that I can get a deeper level of support. Maybe I pair Voice Dream Writer with a third-party keyboard that gives them some additional writing support. So suddenly I'm using two apps at the same time, what they call app smashing. So I'm finding the features I need of both and using them together. But remember, understand what those features are. Do those features meet the needs of your student? If this is not a need for my student, well, then there's no real reason to provide them with that tool. So again, go back to the set framework, go back to what does my student need as we look at it. The other thing which is exciting, we think about writing for different levels of writers. Crick Software has done a really nice job of bringing their Clicker product into the iOS environment. So if you're using iOS devices, iPads, you can have these different apps to provide different levels of support. What's interesting is they have apps that will take you from your emergent writer all the way up to your skilled writers that might need just some support still. And so from the left, we start with Clicker Sentences, which is very much your starting writers. So some of the features that all of these tools have, they all have text-to-speech support. So they'll all read the materials out loud. They will have the ability, each of them, to provide support to you in a different way. Clicker Sentences provides that through grids, pre-stored words, and the student is using model sentences to insert those words in. You'll notice on that one, as you look down the left column, the green column, and you see the picture at the bottom of the app, there are picture prompt supports that can be dropped into the writing to give the student additional levels of support. And then the words drop into the sentences in order to help them build a sentence. Clicker Connect is that next stage of writer. And so we look at this support that has, and again, pictures paired with text to provide some support, word banks to provide support. Word banks can also have spelling, but mostly words with picture support. You have the sentence starters are there on the left. So again, so the next level up, this support for writing. So if we start with the most support that a student would need with sentences, then we move to Clicker Connect. Students are starting to develop their writing skills. They're getting better as writers, and now maybe need a little less support. We can use that. Clicker Docs will still give some support, but now we've moved to letter support. This is all about moving them into independent writing through the use of the keyboard and word banks that they would then use to construct their own writing. And so we start thinking of how that might work for them. Again, with speech output, the ability to provide levels of support. And then Clicker Books is a publishing tool. mean, if we think about how we're going to go about and publish work, we can look at Clicker Books where the students can write. There's pictures that can be inserted in there. They have all of those different additional supports. They can record audio and embed it in there. So I know we had talked about in one of the other webinars, in the reading webinar, we had spoken about Book Creator, which is another app that you might be able to use for this publishing piece. And Book Creator will give you that same level of support. The students can insert pictures and videos and graphics, and they can draw on the screen and they can type on the screen. But it's about giving them that level of support in order to demonstrate their knowledge. So that publishing piece, all these apps will give those kinds of supports for them. It's another example. Here's a quick video of the Clicker app working, just to give you a sense of how this works.
Clicker Sentences, an innovative app from Crick Software, develops writing skills in young students, struggling writers, and English language learners, helping them build the first sentences one word at a time. They just tap on the words to write the sentence. Realistic speech support enables active engagement with the text and encourages students to reread their sentences to find and correct errors for themselves.
The butterfly pushes itself out of the chrysalis.
Students simply swipe to get to the next sentence, and they benefit from child-friendly tools and different types of model sentences.
So if you got kind of a sense, I won't play the whole video, I just wanted to see it working. This idea of being able to embed pictures in there, you heard the description of the model sentences there, you have the word bank below it the student can use to develop their own writing sentence about that. There is text-to-speech support as it goes through. So again, that was sentences. So that's the idea of giving that higher level of support for your emergent writers as they're starting this process. So something to look at. As we go through, I would say to you, try these. I'm hoping that if you saw something that was good, you pause the webinar. That's the beauty of a recording, is you could pause the webinar, go off and play with it, and then come back. So you could go install things and then come back. So try these things out. Comment on them in the Google Doc. This is what we want to hear from each other, is what did we find? How did it work? How might I use this with a student? I want you to think broadly about this. Think about this creatively, solving the problems with some of these apps that are out there. Looking at the ones, and like I said, I only gave you some, but at least it was a starting point. I'll give you a couple more just because, and actually what I'll do is I'll give you this resource which has quite a few more. And this is that moment where I'll just say to you, go off and explore. This is the app wheel for students with dyslexia. This is from Calls of Scotland. You can download this from their website. The link to it is on our Google Doc, so you don't have to stop the webinar to go type that in right now. The link is in our Google Doc. You can click it. You can go there. And what they've done with this wheel is the center of the wheel is yellow, and it tells you about the main area of focus. Is it reading? Is it writing? Is it numbers? Is it organization or memory? As you branch out from that into the purple ring breaks down that area into areas of focus. So when we think about looking at the writing piece, am I looking at speech recognition or word processing, audio notes, word prediction, sentence structure, letter formation? I had mentioned before I wasn't going to show you any of those apps, but here's a couple to start off with. See if those are a good jumping off point for your student. And like anything else, that's given as a starting point. Look there, see if some of the apps there help you. If not, use some of the strategies we all use when we go to the App Store. Look at the bottom, see what other people have installed. It says people also looked at, people have also purchased. What are the apps that other people are looking at? What are the apps that are listed as similar apps? And then do some exploration and find that. So I've given you that link in there in the Google Doc. You also have a link to the UDL app placemat. which will give you some supports for writing, that will give you some starting points. And all these really is starting points. We're not going to know what's right for every student. We have to figure that out. And so you're going to know what's right for your student as you start exploring them, looking at the features, and determining, do those features meet the needs of my student? So definitely keep that in there. Share it in the Google Doc. Put that information in there. I'm really hoping that those Google Docs become an area of real support for us, so that it keeps this conversation going as we move forward. Before we can connect in real time to speak with each other, I'm hoping that we all will use that. So please take some time, put some information in there so that your other learners around us, the other members of our network here, can learn from your experiences. I appreciate your time today. I hope you found this valuable. And again, it didn't show us everything, but it gave us a good jumping off point. And that's really what I was striving for here, is just to give us something. Don't forget about that Google Doc to put things in. There's our link to get back to everything. Remember, all the webinars are there. Each webinar has its own Google Doc. So remember, if you're wanting to connect with people about a certain topic, visit that page and open that Google document, because there are going to be 10 different documents that are going to be running, because it seemed to putting that all in one seemed like a bit of a nightmare. So we have 10 separate documents, each of them focused on a certain area of AT. And everything lives at the Google site, which is sites.google.com/view/NHATI webinars. One more time, put it in your calendar. This might be a good time to pause the webinar, get your calendar out, and drop this in there. We will get together to talk about this in real time on Thursday, October 12th at 3 o'clock. So make sure you're with me that day, and we will talk about all things writing with apps. So bring your ideas, bring your thoughts, bring your suggestions. Be ready to participate. I don't want that to be a one-sided affair. I don't want to be the one talking the whole time. I've heard myself talk. It's enough already. I want to hear from you guys. I want you guys to share your ideas. I want you to lead the group. I want you to tell us about things you're doing. We're all doing great stuff. We want to hear from everybody so we can all get better at what we do. So remember, Thursday, October 12th, 3 o'clock. And finally, you can't escape a webinar without me plugging Twitter. You might think you can, and who knows, maybe you paused it or stopped it at this point, and so you're not hearing this. But if you stayed, you're going to hear it. If you want to grow your network, and I will tell you, you want to grow your network. You want to connect with more people. You want to share ideas with other individuals that do the same type of work that we do. If that's something you're interested in, join us on Wednesday nights. Every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, we get together on Twitter for a live AT chat. We talk about areas of technology related to education and students with disabilities. So join us. There's people from all across the country there who are interested in assistive technology and have ideas they want to share and questions they want answered. So hopefully you'll join us. If you don't feel comfortable joining us, that's okay. What I would say is, on our Google site, I put a link to a spreadsheet that has every AT chat story. And so it's a website where I'm able to create a story from every chat. And you can go through and read every tweet from every chat. And you don't even have to be on Twitter to do it. So if Twitter is scary to you, you can still get the information without participating in real time. So you have that. I put it on our Google site, so it's there. You'll be able to get to it. So definitely check that out. You'll get some great resources off that page. All right, we've come to the end. Again, I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, comments, ideas, strategies, whatever, reach out to me. There's my website, my email address, my Twitter handle. I'd be happy to chat with you about anything and everything. So make sure you connect. Again, I thank you for participating in this webinar. I hope it was helpful for you. And I look forward to talking to you on the Google Docs and then talking to you during the AT Tool Time chats. So thanks very much and have a good rest of the day. Take care.